I came to the University of Arizona to play baseball in 1973. I started playing rugby at the University of Arizona in January of 1974. I have been a member of the team as a player or coach since January of 1974 without interruption. You know, I think it goes through stages. What got me into rugby to begin with was the fact that it offered me a chance to remain an athlete and play and compete. When I found out, like many 18 and 19-year-olds do in America, that your baseball career is not going to happen like you thought. Like many kids, thought I was going to sign a professional baseball contract. I went to the U of A to play baseball. That didn't happen. And I couldn't imagine not competing, so I ended up playing something called rugby. I had a little taste of it in high school in Southern California. Met a guy named Chuck Kyvan who said, "Show up on Tuesday." I did, and began an odyssey of loving the game and lifelong friendships. The next thing that was very important, in 1976, I was asked to play on a team that was pretty much assembled for specifically touring England and Wales, and there I met all kinds of lifelong friends, but a mentor in terms of coaching, excuse me, his name is John Evans, and John was the coach at Cardiff at that time. He was a track and field guy for the country of Wales, but more importantly, he was the coach of a team, a club team, which defeated the country of Australia when Welsh rugby was at its very apex. That's when they won the triple crown. So I happened to be over in Wales at that particular time, and that was very much an inspirational part. And then after that, just flat out making more friends around the world because of rugby union, and not just domestically, but lifelong friendships that have been made in Canada, in New Zealand, Australia, Scotland, England, Wales, Ireland, Hong Kong, and it's been an incredible ride. 22, when we found ourselves without a coach, and John Evans, the man I mentioned a moment ago, had mentored me when I was about 20 on the nose, and so I was one of the few people that had that type of coaching clinic, if you will, or coaching programs that have been drilled into me in the hillsides of Wales back in 1976 and again in 1978. I have made so many lasting friendships and have had the almost indescribable honor of having an effect on so many young men. As I grew older and found out that coaching rugby was certainly about understanding rugby, and as the game evolves, you realize that you never know everything about the game. I study more nowadays about what rugby is and how it changes and evolves and what's required for a player to be an individually good player, much less a team in its units or its 15s in total be a good team. So I have known that that is exciting and that's a great deal of fun, but the relationships with young men over the course of the past 34 years have been remarkable. I stay in touch with them, they stay in touch with me, and I'm very proud of that. I probably have had 1,200 guys play for the University of Arizona while I've coached it, and I know we're about 500 or 600 of the bar tonight, and they know I know. I'm like Santa Claus. I know when they're sleeping, and I know when they're awake. Formulated 3 great beliefs as a result of the 1,200 contacts. And that doesn't count the All-Americans and opponent young men. So the multiples are pretty staggering in all those countries. And I feel very strongly about this because this is the subject of a radio program I've had and also a book that I will soon be completing. And that is these 3 basic fundamentals. One is the golden rule. I've watched people be successful because they treat other people as they wanted to be treated themselves. That works in teams, that works in relationships, it works in all of their lives. And what's interesting about that is that the golden rule is not taught very much anymore. But when I go to somebody and I say, would you imagine if the ancient Asians and the ancient Jews and the beginning of Christianity all agreed on the same premise? Wouldn't that be interesting? And they go, yeah, that would be interesting. Well, they do. Confucius uttered the golden rule. Hillel uttered the golden rule. And then Jesus Christ uttered the golden rule. There's big 3. And so I find that one of the more enriching findings of the journey so far. The second thing is, to thine own self be true. It was first uttered by the Oracle at Delphi, and it was Shakespeare who made it more popular with simply, to thine own self be true. If you can't get up in the morning and look at yourself in the mirror, you've got some real problems, and that's a good thing. That allows us to have some sort of conscience. It allows us to have some self-reflection on if we are really doing what it is we need to be doing. And finally, and the last thing is an absolute love, respect, and in my mind, promotion of competition. I am so angry about people who complain about children being competitive. Competition is exactly the way that nature's God has set up this planet. If you don't believe me, watch the Discovery Channel sometime, because that's when everybody plays for keeps. That's the way the planet works. That's the way business works. That's the way education works. We are at our best, but we try our best every day because we're competing not with just the other person, but we're competing against ourselves, against the darker angels in our being. I think it's wonderful stuff. So those are the three big premises that I've tried to impart to young men, and of course the one that they'll all nod and say yes when they hear back: time and place. There's a time and place for just about everything that we do. In the 1970s, rugby was very much an anti-establishment sport. We didn't have the type of mentoring that we attempt to distribute today. But I will tell you this, lifelong friendships just like you and other teammates have made over the years because of that bond of playing together and suffering both good times and hard times together. And that's what makes relationships, because they are ups and downs. That's what competition teaches us. That you don't win every game, and you certainly don't want to lose every game. You just want to do your best that you can. So to answer your question, the guys I played with have remained friends. We probably had 23 on the team as opposed to 80 now, and I know where about 20 of them are, and I probably stay in contact with 10 of them on a weekly basis, and that's something. There's a lot to be said for that. Relationships that are 40 years old now. One of the things that coaches will tell you, and I've had a great opportunity to study under great rugby coaches, as well as people who don't coach rugby and don't know much about rugby, like guys like Larry Smith and Dick Tomey at the University of Arizona, not to mention Lute Olson and Bart Starr, who have been mentoring me, and one guy, of course, has had a tremendous impact on me, and that was the man who got me to Arizona. That's Jerry Kindle. He's the man who cut me, and yet we've stayed very, very close, and I consider him an extraordinarily close friend as those other coaches. One of the things you'll learn is that in coaching is your highest highs never equal your lowest lows, and people don't understand that. But if you would take the great joy, I will tell you this. For instance, at the University of Arizona, there is a craving to win a Rose Bowl, even getting to a Rose Bowl game, much less winning it. But a coach will tell you, by winning the Rose Bowl, which you think is the pinnacle, it will never equal out those terrible times when there's been human tragedy in coaching or a tragic outcome to a contest. It just doesn't work that way. And so the lesson out of all of this is that it's not a specific day that we won or a specific day that we lost. It's all of those relationships and touches with people that matter to you that make a 34-year coaching career so much fun and so much such an important part of a life. As I look at Chris Kron having to face one of those incredible downs. That is when you were selected to play for the United States in Hong Kong, and a week before you were to report, you suffered a debilitating shoulder injury. And you had to live with the fact that you had a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that eluded you because of a hard ground and a tackle in just a college game. And it was a year later that you were able to take the surgery, do all the rehabilitation work, and have the courage to play the same game that had actually injured you and go on to play successfully for the United States. What that did, Chris, that little episode there taught you a great deal about disappointment and how to rebound from disappointment. And I think that incident, more than anything else, helped shape you. And I've got recollections of many players who have had to take on some sort of major disappointment and correct their lives and in a couple of instances, I take the greatest pride in not an athletic achievement, but life-changing achievements where I've had a conversation with a player who was experiencing some great pain because of something that they did or something that we were experiencing in their lives, and we discussed it, and they were able to make a pivot, change 90 degrees, not 180, 90, vector into a different direction, and have a successful life. One of the hardest things for young men to understand in our culture is the value of doing your best. If you want to grow trust with someone, if you want to grow trust with colleagues, teammates, people at work, and you've heard this before, you know, this is someone like him. This is tough. There's something up. Because this person, in your case, had always come working as hard as possible. There is a great deal of value in that basic concept of always trying your best, because when it is difficult to carry on, others around you will come to your aid more quickly than if someone who, quite frankly, well, they really don't care. They're not there that often. It's really not that big a deal to them. Then you realize there's nothing that's a big deal. One of the things that's interesting to me, and I know that I preach one thing and sometimes I do another, is you really don't want to do too many things that aren't important to you, just because they take away from the things that you think are important. And I know in my life I've got all these balls in the air, and that's just the way I've accumulated things. Could explain why if I had to. But I've often noticed that with young men, and there are people who can multitask and multitask very well, but it's a matter of, are you prepared to do all that it takes to do that multitasking or carry on with several different disciplines that are intriguing to you, but do you really want to do them or not? And I think most people see through that. And we all make mistakes at that. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I know quite the opposite. But that's one thing I've been able to watch over the years, is watching young men who work as hard as they possibly can and have that difficult time. And when you have had a history of working as hard as you can, there are more remedies for your problems than you could ever imagine, just because of that core belief. I have had to reconcile how much time this has taken. It has altered my business careers and my opportunities in broadcasting. And back when I was with the Golden Eagle and the Anheuser-Busch companies, I know that there are members of my family at times that were very much bewildered by my absolute attention to the University of Arizona Rugby program. I think there was a gratitude I always felt, and a comfort level I always felt, that was my metaphor for life, was rugby. It's a very hard game. It's an unusual game. As much as I loved baseball, I don't think I could have done this for baseball. There's something about rugby, asking a young man to go on the field with his teammates and play as hard as he can. And the thing I've loved about the University of Arizona Rugby program is that we virtually don't cut. So I've got some young men who maybe weren't exactly designed to play rugby, but they're going to give it a go anyway. And you look them in the eye and say, "Did you try your best?" And they said, "I did." And you realize they did, and you pat them on the head, and that's it. So I just think that I've had a remarkable opportunity to have influence on and be influenced by the people that have been a part of the University of Arizona rugby team, whether they be parents, supporters, the actual players, assistant coaches, the other coaches from other programs, and other people who administrate, play, coach, and commentate on rugby around the world. One of the interesting phenomenon we have in our country every year is a discussion about our weight midway through December. And the discussion is that when January rolls around, I'm going to radically change my behavior, and I'm going to eat differently, and I'm going to exercise every day. Meanwhile, we spend the last 2 weeks of December gorging, staying up late, and not exercising at all. And what you learn, and what I've been taught by a couple of brilliant speakers I've listened to, one was Dr. Wayne Dyer He's an author of several books. And that is to say that if you don't really believe in that behavior, then you won't do it. And you prove that you don't believe in that behavior because the last 2 weeks of December you continue gorging. That means you really do want to gorge. You don't want to live that other life. I reverse that logic around a little bit and just say I have just wanted to be the best I could be at mentoring young men. The rugby at the University of Arizona has been an interesting metaphor because so much of the time is spent administrating it and trying to get it funded. The closest game we've got is 112 miles. The next one's 375 miles, and that's over at San Diego State. So it's constantly a siege trying to get kids enough money one way or the other to be able to continue doing these things. And it just became something I was. It just became something I enjoyed. I enjoyed being called coach. I enjoyed the relationships I had with players. And as we got further into the game, it was about your time that I started getting more engaged with parents. When I played rugby, there was not a parent to be seen anywhere near the touchline. They said, "Oh my God, my son's playing rugby? Why?" And nowadays, I got parents. In the last 2 months, I've probably had contact with about 20 different parents from around the country that want their sons to play rugby at the University of Arizona. So it is pretty intoxicating. And those relationships and the metaphor of rugby have become part of what I am and what I do, and just try to be as good as I can at that. Yeah, I think that's important. California, it's a varsity sport in California. We're different. The mission is slightly different. We both want to play the best rugby possible, but Coach Clark has made California rugby a true varsity triumph at that school. It was their first official sport at Cal. He inherited a great program and made it even better, and that's difficult to do. So the difference is, though, that Coach Clark and I have had discussions about how much, quote, recreational rugby, and quite frankly, there's a lot of kids on the thirds and fourth team that we run around with that would never even be given an opportunity other than maybe being a manager at Cal. And that's been part of our deal. I would like to see that part of our tradition stay intact. One of my greatest joys about our alumni is that so many times they're one of the players who played the most in the varsity, has a best friend for life that maybe did not start on the varsity all the time and just got to a few minutes in varsity games or in his last year in the program or something like that. It's because we have a mutual respect for anybody who plays the game and gives it their best effort. And I believe there's a lot to be said for that. So one of the things I think at Arizona Rugby that needs to continue if we want it to be Arizona Rugby, and that is our belief that if you want to play and give it your best, that we'll try to find a place for you somewhere in our program to continue to play. I mean, this weekend's a perfect example. I mean, nobody else brings 70 kids up to a tournament for 3 games, and we did. We brought 70 players up here, and they're enjoying themselves and each other, and it's part of the team building and culture building that we do at the University of Arizona. I think the other component that is very important is that we continue to improve the coaching that we give. I am very proud of the young people that are coaching in our program now. They all played at Arizona. They are all hungry to learn, and they're very eager and enthusiastic to teach. And I take great pride in that. And that's what we're going to have to take. And I do believe there's something special about coaches who have come from our program to understand our culture. Our culture is unlike any other in the country. It's not just me, but it's everybody else who's been involved in this thing. We've kind of developed this together. And it is an interesting brotherhood. And I'll just never forget kidding everybody, because I'm the only person who either played with everybody or coached everybody. The program is 4 years old when I came into it, so I probably missed only 4 or 5 people that were ever associated with the University of Arizona Rugby program. And I remember when we had our 40th anniversary celebration, because I knew everybody, and I knew everybody coming, obviously, and I said, you will find out that you are the same people with different last names. So we started meeting Thursday night at Gentle Ben's. Then we started meeting Friday at the golf tournament. And then Friday night at parties. And then it was Saturday morning at the breakfast. And then all of a sudden it was game time against San Diego State. And then the university allowed us to have that little beer festival at the end of the game on our adjacent pitch. And I just looked at you people. And there they were, guys from the 70s, guys from the 80s, guys from the 90s, guys from the 00s, hugging, hanging around, singing songs together as if they knew each other for their entire lives. And that is part of the University of Arizona rugby experience. We do have a peculiar culture of working hard and having a lot of fun.
So would you do anything different, right, in regards to your sacrifice? Would you change anything?
I think I'd have been smarter about some of the things I did in rugby, which I think took up a little additional time. I spent 10 years in the All-Americans, which I enjoyed, but I was still coaching the U of A. Maybe that wasn't such a good idea. You know, there are things like that where I took on some additional things outside of U of A rugby on national causes. That I look back, maybe that was or was not the thing to do, but when I second-guessed myself on that, my association in national programs is what helps get the University of Arizona into the best tournaments or have that national credibility, if nothing else. So, you know, those associations were good for the program. But, yeah, I might spend a little less time on some of the national programs and things I did. And I would have really hoped I would have learned some of the secrets of coaching a lot earlier and that I do now. Whereas I do a lot more assignment at practice to the other coaches subtly, and I let them do a lot more coaching now. And I have the young people that are in the program now. I get them better organized to accomplish things for the club, which was intended to do in terms of developing student leadership. So, you know, it took a while for me to realize I don't have to do everything, but that's part of growing up for all of us.
Yeah, so we're incredibly indebted to everything that you've provided. And obviously you would never admit to the sacrifices that you've made and how it's impacted your life. But we just wanted to, as a team, be able to say thank you. Because what we've been able to get from you is that we'll never be able to repay. So thank you very much.
Well, you know, as we all reflect, and there's a great line in The Bridge on the Rugby when Colonel Nicholson loses his stick, swagger stick, over the side of the bridge. He says, "Drop. It's been a very good career in the military, but suddenly you realize you're closer to the end than you are to the beginning." And you know, that's where I'm at now. I'm closer to the end than I am to the beginning, and it's an interesting time to reflect, and I appreciate you and others wanting to investigate all this and see how we're going to maintain and make this thing go forward. And I think that we will by having a committed alumni board. The university has signed off on that as a concept, and guys who actually played in the program are the ones who are going to foster this into the future. And as long as I can be involved with it, and in one facet or another, we'll continue doing that. And you know, maybe I'll be buried with Red Sox now with White Caps. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you.
My pleasure.
All right.
Thank you very much. It's been very good.